We are back on the topic of NFT with Anouk Summermatter with us. She's at the top of G Ventures Consulting, and she's going to bring her perspective into NFT because we spoke about art, ownership, but in the gaming world, it's something really important that is pretty transformative. So Anouk, thank you for being with us, and maybe tell us more about you and how you entered in NFT.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So NFTs and gaming are relatively new. It's like 2017 CryptoKitties. But I think the whole NFT space and gaming and that marriage is just makes very much sense because the new games are basically a collector loop, right? You either earn or buy items and you could collect them. But in a normal traditional AAA game, what do you do with them? You don't own them, so you can do a certain amount of things. But the gaming economy is like a walled garden, so you can't exchange it. The NFTs in gaming, those are like blockchain games, allow that economy to be partially open and dynamic. That allows basically the gamers to have that sense of ownership, and then trade and exchange it. And now there's even there's even a marketplace where you can rent them and lend them. So it's still very new, right? It's like when internet was I think one of you speakers was saying that when internet was conceived, it was at the beginning. There wasn't all the applications and everything, and that's where we are right now with blockchain and NFTs. But at some point, there are going to be a lot of different applications on top of the blockchain.
Because before NFT, if we had to evaluate the market value of all these digital assets in gaming, do you have an estimate or roughly?
Well, EA just published their first quarter for the year, and basically in their what they said in those documents that are filed with the SEC is basically that 29% of their revenue last year, sorry, it was for last year, 29% of their revenue, that is 1.6 billion, came from loot boxes.
Wow, that's just one company.
And that's just one company, right? And loot boxes are basically, again, this box where you collect or earn items. You can buy them or they get dropped in the games, but that gives you basically a sense of one company of the economy. But most companies out there in the gaming environment, what we call recurring consumer spending, that's how much, that's over 50% of their bookings at the end of the year.
But if they make so much revenue now already, what would be their incentive to embed NFTs in the system?
So those big gaming companies are not embedding NFTs at this point in time, right? They're not. What we're seeing is like a lot of different companies and that they're starting the blockchain and they're embedding, but the companies that have a lot of incentive to embed NFTs in or create blockchains are especially the ones right now in the mobile sector. Because what happens in the mobile sector, most of the titles are free to play and user acquisition is quite expensive and retention rate of the players is very low. But when you basically tell a player or allow a player to own something and trade something and perhaps to make a living out of it, that will increase retention rate. So there's a lot of companies in the mobile sector that are going to invest in that and are doing it.
So if you look a couple of years in front of us, you'll be able to purchase like through the App Store, even like your NFT directly, or there will be we talk like with the Epic suits and everything right now. Like I was wondering how would this be embedded in the like iOS ecosystem, for instance, or?
So I think Apple is a monopoly, and there's a big case about it right now with exactly. Apple. So all those big companies are like again closed gardens. But a lot of the blockchain's items that we're seeing, games and collector items are going to be more and more, I think, built on Unreal, Unity engine exactly for that at some point in the long term to be dropped in the metaverse. So there has to be a certain amount of compatibility in terms of the infrastructure and how it works. So I think that's the long-term goal.
Because in the long term, you could really like use digital assets in one metaverse and then bring it to another one, or it could be completely intercompatible.
The large company is going to take a lot of time, right? Because they're walled gardens, but within titles, within items within a same company, that's a highly incentive issue. And also, for example, companies that have esports attached to some of their games. Imagine if you have like an NFT on a weapon and you just won the world record, with that weapon, then you can rent it and lend it for all the players within that esport, universe. It's yeah.
And the potential is amazing.
It's big,
Yeah.
and we're seeing that, and we're seeing also even like non-NFT assets, so digital assets. I think 2 weeks ago or last week there was a Gucci bag that it was sold on roadblocks, and it was sold $1,000 more expensive than the real thing, the physical twin. The digital was more expensive, and we were seeing that also in the art space. There was, I think, a bike. The same thing happened. So it's the potential is immense, and to give also the players, ownership, investment in the game, not just as a consumer, but as an investor.
And now, how can you imagine? I'm an indie game company. How could you help me to basically embed this in my systems?
Well, I'm not an engineer, so I think that you need to get the right team, to basically work on the blockchain and embed it. I think that what's happening in a lot of those blockchain games is like, how do you figure out the economy, right? So it's of the actual products, so that you're empowered, but you also, keep the company alive and growing. It's a dynamic, open economy, but it's partially open. It's not 100% open. So it's a balance. It's a balance, and I think technology will help as well. As we move forward with more options.
And what do you think overall of the gaming industry in Switzerland right now? Like,
I think it's wonderful we have a gaming industry, and I think that's we're very lucky to have Pearl Vestia that was finally recognized, as I heard, as a full entity in Switzerland. I think it lacks funding. I think there's much more initiatives that can be taken, not only at the federal level, but also at the cantonal level in terms of tax credit, funding. Right now, there's no even people that want to play esports, there's no place. Everyone has to organize and fund their own communities. There's a lot of initiatives that are happening, sporadically in different cities and cantons, but they're silos. We're not using in Switzerland, I feel, the intelligence of the group to develop the industry a little bit, further. And a lot of talent is being exported. Because there's like over 13 universities that provide diplomas and bachelors and some sort of diplomas in the gaming universe. But what do they do with that here?
what's the maximum level of funding you could get with Pro Helvetia, for instance, for a game that someone is producing?
I wouldn't know now because they changed their rules, so I don't know that. But considering that a AAA game, is more expensive than an Avatar movie, so we're talking about, this is like 7, 8 digits. I mean, those are large amounts. The Swiss gaming industry is really indie. Yeah. Those are small games.
But there's indie, for instance. I remember that I was expert at the Canadian Film Fund, which also supports games and experimental projects, and we could distribute about $1.5 million to each project.
That's wonderful.
And so these are indie games.
And indie games usually is anything under 20 million, right? Yeah. But in Switzerland it's indie. So I don't think there is a game in Switzerland that's over like 2 million. Mm-hmm. And they don't have that budget. And that's wonderful. And in Canada is a big country for gaming, and so I think more funding is needed to actually make this viable economy in the long term in Switzerland.
But there's a lot of wealth available in Switzerland. So if people are listening to you, private investors, people who have capital, what could you say to them to encourage them to look further into that direction? Which
camera should I talk to? Okay, well, contact me. There's a lot of need. There's a lot of wonderful projects here in Switzerland, for-profit and not-for-profit as well. Some projects are using gaming to do scientific research, to better the humankind. So there's a lot of initiatives that are happening here, and funding is needed.
So you listen to Anouk, it's very crucial. I think we're lucky to have Pro Helvetia indeed, which at least also on the philosophical level has embedded game in arts. Because that's always a very important step.
Cultural, correct.
Yeah.
There's been a reluctance to consider or to recognize gaming as a cultural, artistic endeavor, and it is.
Yeah, And when I was working with APLAB, for instance, it's thanks to Paul Helvetia that we went to the GDC, or places where we're really able to promote the work and create strong partnerships. And we see this happening often, to have a US space and a Swiss space for Swiss companies after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there any questions for Anouk? I think
Just to add to that point, for gaming in Switzerland, as we discussed earlier, one canton, Canton Vaud, is the first canton to have a call for projects of 50,000 each year. Previously with Pro Helvetia, it was about maximum you could get with each over a 1.5-year period was about 90,000. Again, things are being restructured, but to the point is there isn't the funding. We don't have second circles for our studios across Switzerland. So just to echo and to help raise the voice for that, the incredible importance to recognize that this is the cross-section of creativity and technology, and it's where innovation lives, and it affects so many other industries. They look to gaming; it's on the cutting edge, and there's so many opportunities for investment across Switzerland in this space.
So, yeah, I remember once you told me something funny. We were talking about VR, and you told me that sometimes things you see in interactive VR is like incomparable to what's happening in gaming, and that the gaming industry is really the leader.
The gaming, yes, I would say a lot of work that's been happening in VR has come from film, so it's immersive, but they've taken a lot of interactivity that's quite basic, and had they even played any type of game in the last 15 years, they would have been able to develop something more rich and emotional to express in an interactive manner through their VR films. So there's so much to learn. Even the storytelling in games is incredibly rich and powerful in ways that I think may surprise people that have a sort of fixed, Switzerland still has a kind of fixed idea where games are and what it does. And in fact, it's so much richer and deeper than they can really imagine. And the other point to add on what Anouk had said, that with NFTs, with this space, that actually there's so many opportunities for the people around gaming, so youngsters to get involved. Roblox is a place for community building and learning about games and connection, so that people are connecting through gaming in ways and actually can make money in that space. Even being a coach for a game for other people in esports. Like, it's this kind of virtuous circle that is happening in other countries that we are really at the first step with in Switzerland, and it's an opportunity for us. It's not something to be afraid of, but it's actually something to engage with and lean towards.
Thank you, and thank you to both of you for the work you're doing.
I just want to say, it's something that is happening. Like, gaming is happening, is massive. So it's the support that is needed at the local and governmental level is needed now, because this is an inevitable reality.
Excellent. So I hope those who listened, and there is a lot of capital in our country. So put it in gaming, call Anouk, call Erin Rose, and figure out what you need to do. Thank you very much, Anouk.
Thank you.
Merci.